Good morning slash afternoon, everybody. My name is Stibben with the State Police,
And my name is JoJo with the Sheriff's Department.
and we're here to talk to you about becoming a LEO or a deputy. Normally, we would start with a meet and greet where we say our name and something interesting about us that's non-Mayfair related. So, to continue this tradition, I'd like to ask that once you get to this point in the training series that you open up the Discord and you find either SCDPS or MCSD general chat and you say your in-game name, so like mine would be Stibben, and something interesting about you that's non-Mayfair related. Like for me, I love riding motorcycles in real life and I own several of them. If you want a picture, just ask me, I'll send you one. So say something interesting about you in the general chat and then come back to the video. Since the beginning, State Police has had a motto, and now this motto should be carried to the Sheriff's Department as well, under JoJo's new leadership, that we care about everybody and we're a team, and you're part of a team, and we want to work together and support each other. So, no matter what division you're role-playing as, strive to involve the other division in your traffic stop or in your stop in some way. So if you're playing as patrol, you should want to always have someone from transport there by your side giving you support, even if you don't necessarily need them. And the reason for that is it's going to help facilitate a greater knowledge and understanding of everybody through involving them in unique roleplay scenarios. And there's no better way to grow as an individual than through collaboration with your fellow officers. And besides, you might make a friend too. So, I want to talk about protected class first. Protected class means someone who is either developmentally disabled, elderly, a law enforcement officer, an emergency medical technician, someone along those lines. If something happens to a protected class, it's usually always a felony. Like for example, if you slap an old lady, that's felony assault. So, it's also important to know what you can and can't arrest people for. You can be arrested for everything under the sun, literally, except for speeding an open container. So, even if they're traveling 332 miles an hour, you cannot arrest them for speeding. You write them a speeding ticket. And if they have an open container of alcohol in their car, just having that container in their car is not what you arrest them for. They're probably going to be arrested for drunk and disorderly, or drunk in public, or driving under the influence, something along those lines. And we're going to talk about those things here in just a moment. So to kick this off, there are different types of strictly liable offenses, which means something that an officer sees you do, but he doesn't need evidence. So these are just tickets. These can involve things like moving and non-moving violations, which an example of a moving violation is excessive lane change, or traveling past a stop sign without stopping. That's a moving violation. A non-moving violation is like a parking ticket. Pretty self-explanatory there. So, misdemeanors are semi-serious crimes that could give you, from 1 to 5 years in jail and a hefty fine. And felonies could be 5 to 10 years or life in jail and hefty fines. And capital, depending on what state you're in, may carry a death penalty. So, when does something become capital? That's a good question. Well, say you're running from police and you're currently committing what's called felony evading. So you're in the act of committing a felony, and say you run someone over and they die. That would normally be like a felony assault and a manslaughter charge, but we dumb that down to murder, which is still a felony, ironically. But since you committed a felony in the process of committing another felony, it becomes a capital murder charge. So there are different levels of things on Mayfair that you're going to encounter that are either misdemeanors or felonies. Just remember that strictly liable offenses are usually something simple like traffic tickets. So let's talk about assault. So assault can have two different definitions. There's going to be simple assault, which could be, someone pushes or slaps you. Remember, if you push or slap a protected class person, it's automatically a felony, and not simple assault, which is a misdemeanor. So misdemeanor assault is pushing, slapping, light contact, stuff like that. If you have, anytime there's a weapon in the hand or mentioned, it becomes a felony assault. Even if they don't have it in their hand and they flash it to you by pulling up their waistband and they're like, yeah, check this out, it's still felony assault. If they have their face covered by a mask, that's felony assault. It's also a form of terroristic threatening or terrorism. Say you're just starting your shift, you just came out of the locker room, you're walking out the front door, and you see two guys just slugging it out, just decking each other in the face, calling each other names. You can arrest both of these individuals for felony assault as they're physically hitting each other, right, with closed fists. Remember, simple assault or misdemeanor assault is pushing or shoving. If you see them pushing or shoving each other, whichever one's doing that is committing misdemeanor assault. As soon as a haymaker gets thrown, or like a serious closed fist attack, or they pull out a weapon, felony assault. You can arrest them on the spot and send them straight to jail. Reckless driving, where an injury has occurred, is a misdemeanor charge, and reckless driving where a serious injury has occurred is a felony charge. Another type of driving related misdemeanor felony example is going to be failure to render aid. How many times have you guys been on a traffic scene and someone's hurt and you're trying to call for emergency medical services, and some jackass in a Bugatti rips through the middle of the scene and runs your victim over? Just boop boop, and they're gone, right? That person, in addition to committing vehicular assault, which is a felony, they've also committed failure to render aid, which is, since there's a serious injury, is another felony. If you're an extra on that scene, you can go chase them down and throw them in jail for a very long time, 10 to 20 years. So, in Mayfair terms, that would be like 10 minutes, or the rest of the night, actually. Let's talk about impediment. Impediment is whenever someone or something is blocking the flow of something. For example, it could be a person standing in a doorway or obstructing a sidewalk and refusing to leave. It could be a vehicle. Have you ever been parked on the side of the road and someone drives up next to you? Hey, officer. That person is committing impediment, and you can arrest them for that. And on the subject of coming up to your car and talking to you, people on Mayfair seem to love to randomly come up and tell you their problems when you're in the middle of giving someone a traffic ticket. So that person that walks up and disturbs you while you're on an investigation is committing something called obstruction. You need to just simply ask them to leave one time. If they fail to do so, you can arrest them for obstruction. The full charge is called obstruction of justice. Basically, it's them prohibiting you from doing your lawful duty. Let's talk about possession, specifically of a controlled substance. Let's say you're on a traffic stop and the driver has indicated that they've had some marijuana. Well, number one, they're going to jail for driving under the influence. So let's change it and say maybe they're a passenger, and maybe the driver's clean, but the passenger has a little bit of marijuana on them. Well, if they were nice and admitted it to you, you need to take it from them. That has to happen no matter what. But you don't have to necessarily take them to jail. You could just give them a ticket to appear in court, and then release them on their own recognizance. Or if they're being a jerk, you can take them to jail. Regardless, possession of marijuana is a misdemeanor. If you're going to take them to jail, it's not going to be for very long. So remember that. If they have either cocaine or methamphetamine on them and they openly admit that, then that is a felony, and it doesn't matter what amount. It can be the powder or residue in the bag. Simple possession, by the way, for marijuana, I did not mention, is less than an ounce. It's important to remember that. If they have any type of controlled substance packaged in individual baggies, that's an additional charge, which would be distribution. If you ask them, have they been across state lines with this, then that would be trafficking, which is another felony. So you can ask these questions in the course of your investigation and rack up more charges. Let's talk about attempted murder versus murder. It should be very obvious which one is attempted. If a guy pulls out a gun and points it at you and shoots you in the kneecap, well, that's attempted murder, as long as you don't die. If you die, it becomes murder. So remember that it's only attempted if they pull the trigger. Just pointing a gun at someone is still felony assault. It's not an attempted murder charge unless they actually pull the trigger. So if they, and you could argue attempted murder if they pull the trigger on a handgun, if they try to stab you or they swing at you with some kind of weapon, you could argue that it's an attempted murder charge, which is a felony. And then obviously murder is a felony as well. We don't have different levels of them. Usually there's different levels of, in real life there's different levels of manslaughter and murder. We don't have that. We have just a standard murder charge that encompasses all the murders. Let's talk about driving without license and driving without insurance. So these two, the first time that they're committed, are misdemeanor offenses. The second time that you're caught without your license or insurance, it's a felony, and you can be taken to jail technically for either of those. But do not send someone to jail for driving without a license or driving without insurance. If they own a license and it's good and clear, do not take them to jail for not having it. If they do not have insurance, write them a ticket. Do not take them to jail for that. You can, but don't. I'll be very mad at you and so will JoJo if we hear that you've taken someone to jail for not having a valid insurance. The other big one is going to be driving under the influence. These are always straight to jail kind of things. The first one is a misdemeanor, believe it or not, and anyone thereafter is a felony. So remember, first time offenses, driving without license, driving without insurance, drive under influence, those are misdemeanors. The second time it happens, and third and fourth and fifth times, any times after that are felonies. So let's talk about robbery. Well, robbery happens whenever someone tries to rob you. We don't differentiate between the different types of robbery or the amounts, because there's in real life there are actually different categories for robbery. It's based on the amount. Just like there are different types of theft. Like the game is called Grand Theft, would implicate that it's a vehicle whose value is at least $2,000 or more. So we don't differentiate between those. So if someone asks or demands something from you and you don't want to give it to them and then they try to force it, that is robbery. Let's talk about unlawful carry versus brandishing. So unlawful carry is going to be characterized as either having a weapon sling mounted and carrying it on your back, or carrying it in a holster, like a pistol, like a drop leg holster. Holstered weapons are typically unlawful carries unless the person is an off-duty police officer. They're not allowed to carry that weapon like that. In South Carolina, you have to have a concealed carry weapon permit called a CWP or a CCL from other states, which is called a concealed carry license. South Carolina honors CCLs from other states, so just be aware of that. And it has to be actually concealed, like it can't be visible. That's what concealed means. So as far as brandishing goes, Have you ever had somebody get out of the car and you see them flash a handgun in their hand real quick and then they stuff it back in their pants? That's brandishing. Having the gun in your hand is brandishing. Pulling it out, letting it down by your side, brandishing. Like where you're like puffing up your chest like, oh, motherfucker, I got my gun out now. Right? That's brandishing. So, you see somebody pull a gun, they're going to jail. It needs to be said that if they're en route to hunting or fishing and they can prove it, you should just let them alone. And take this with a grain of salt. If they're at a bank with a ski mask on and body armor, they're not going hunting or fishing. Okay? If they're going from their house to their vehicle and they have it in their hands, that's not brandishing. So, just so we're clear, situationally aware, don't make any false arrests over brandishing. It's very obvious when it's not allowed. So, if you have any questions, ask your supervisor about that. Alright, so now that you've been through roughly like what we're going to be asking you on the evaluations, and you have some time to kind of reflect and maybe go back and listen to some of those things a couple of times, let's close out your Part 1 training with jail time. So as a transport officer, you will need to be putting people in jail. So liability or strictly liable offenses are going to be 30 seconds. These are like traffic tickets if you've arrested them for something that they've done. Maybe they're a jerk. I was not speeding. You're not arresting them for felony speeding. I swear to God. If anyone does that, I will lose my shit. Misdemeanor time is going to be 60 seconds, so that's an increase of double, right? So just following along. Felony time is 120 seconds, which is double that of misdemeanor, and capital time is 240 seconds, being the longest jail sentence you can give someone on Mayfair, and this is double that of the felony. If you arrest someone and charge them with something capital, or remember everything stacks. So if they have 2 felonies, that's 240 seconds. If you jail someone for 240 seconds, they are jailed for life, and you must tell them that they cannot roleplay that character for the rest of the day. As a note, you're required to say that. Alright, so in the past, we would ask people the same questions and we would look for the same answers. That's no longer how we're going to be doing things. You do need to pass an evaluation by a corporal, and the way that that's going to work is they're going to talk about like what we talked about today: protected class, non-arrestable offenses, moving violations, non-moving violations. What does strictly liable mean? What are types of strictly liable offenses? What's an example of misdemeanors and felonies and capital? And we're going to talk about, they're going to ask you questions about assault, terrorism, impediment, obstruction, robbery, evading, attempted murder versus murder, unlawful carry versus brandishing. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff. You're going to be asked random questions, and you have to get 7 out of 10 right to become a fully fledged LEO in state or a deputy in the sheriff's department. Now that you've completed Part 1, feel free to monitor the training announcements routinely for evaluations, and if you have any questions about evaluations, please send a message to your favorite corporal in your respective department. I hope you've enjoyed Part 1 of the training series. If you have any feedback for us, PM either JoJo or Stibbin. On behalf of myself and JoJo, we'd both like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, feel free to PM your corporal or sergeant in your respective department, and or PM one of us in the absence of one of them responding, and let us know what your question is and we'll try to take care of it as soon as possible. And as always, if something wasn't covered in this training and you feel that it should have, likewise tell a corporal or sergeant and we'll see about getting it added. Thanks, and we'll see you out there on patrol. Have a nice day.